right, welcome back to episode somewhere in the 30s of Merriwether's World. For those of you who don't know me or are new to the show, my name is Dr. Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen. By day, I'm a formulation chemist for a major chemical consumer products company, and by evenings and weekends, I am a teacher of wild, edible, and medicinal plants. My book, Idiot's Guide Foraging, is out there. The website, www.foragingtexas, and also here, here on Facebook, on Instagram is Merriweather Forager, and all that sort of thing. As usual, we are blessed to be joined with my daughter, Minnie Weather, who, not sure how much longer we'll be able to keep her around here. Now with the driver's license and looking for a job and all that sort of stuff, we're going to have to use her while we can. All right, so tonight we'll be continuing on the my personal favorite plants for medicinal illnesses. Wilderness illnesses and injuries. Yeah. So in this case, it will be tonight will be plants to help stop bleeding and help prevent or remove infections. But before that, let's do the usual housekeeping stuff. First off, tonight's sponsor is Wazoo Survival Gear. I have a long relationship with these guys. For those of you who aren't familiar with Wazoo Survival Gear, this is started by several NASA engineers who decided, like I said, the planet Earth has lots to explore yet, and they want to make sure people get home with high quality gear. So they make assorted, basically astronaut quality type survival kits and other really interesting and even patented survival gear. If I can bring the camera back here. So like around my neck is their Viking sharpening stone. So you can sharpen your knife. Obviously take it off your neck before sharpening the knife. They also worked with me to make the foraging bandana, which is really cool. 12 common North American edible and medicinal plants. The cash cap. This is a cap with little secret compartments, like a Velcro compartment there and some compartments in there. On the edges, I need to hold it up. On the edges, like I have a fire steel and a little knife. And just to show you the knife, oops, and as I knock over the microphone, hopefully you can still hear me, they make these little tiny ceramic knives that I would say are razor sharp, but these are sharper than razors. If you know anything about ceramic blades, they can be sharpened significantly more sharp than steel. So lots of cool stuff. Thank you, Wazoo Survival Gear, for working with me and being tonight's sponsor. Tonight's presentation is Wild Medicines for Wilderness Survival. And this week we will be focusing on bleeding and infected wounds. So without further ado, like I said, last week we discussed diarrhea, dysentery, and food. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago. Oh, funny story. We were supposed to do this bleeding and infected wounds last week, but I decided I wanted to take a break. I've been working really hard at work, and so I just wanted to rest some. Well, I ended up working past 7 o'clock on that evening, Wednesday evening last week at work. An operator turned the wrong valve, basically, and I had 22,000 pounds of product I had to fix immediately for Walmart. I didn't get any rest or relaxation. I've been working on that pretty much straight since the thing, but that's beside the point. So without any other further sideways travel, let's talk about bleeding and infected wounds. So the plants we are going to talk about tonight, so for bleeding, will be Carolina geranium and shepherd's purse. For bleeding and or infected wounds, so it's like a double purpose sort of thing, will be yarrow and healsall. And then strictly for dealing with infections, our old favorite, oak. There's also sweet gum, cocklebur. A lot of people hate cocklebur. They don't realize it's actually a very potent antibiotic. Turkey tail mushroom and hoof mushrooms. So, starting with bleeding wounds. Obviously, you want to try and stop the bleeding through things like direct pressure. The general first aid for bleeding wounds, you want to apply direct pressure on the wound. You don't want to keep taking the bandage off and switching the bandage off, around. You want to keep the blood-soaked bandage there because that blood is what it needs to trigger the coagulation factors. So you need to, just keep the same bloody bandage in the same spot, pressing on the wound. If possible, elevate the wound, like if it's on an arm or a leg, you want to raise it up above the heart so the blood kind of pools back towards the body. Tourniquet is a thing of last resort. Unless you've just lopped off your whole lower arm with an axe or something out in the woods, or actually maybe cut one of the major arteries, a tourniquet is probably not what you want to use. So you got a wound bleeding, you've done these things, you're out in the woods, still having problems. What do you look for? Well, one of my favorite is Carolina geranium. This is a common weed found all over North America. In fact, if we jump forward, basically everywhere except Colorado. I suck at geology. What's the little white one there? Is that Colorado or yeah, right here? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, right in the center of well, we got a question. What?
Keep the Band-Aid on for how long?
Oh, you want to keep the Band-Aid on until it stops bleeding, basically. You want to keep pressing there. If it's just bleeding and bleeding and bleeding, if you're starting to get woozy, not just from the sight of blood, but losing blood itself, then you definitely want to try and get help. But in the meantime, if you have like just a finger wound or something that's just every time you move it splits open and starts bleeding again, this is where you'd use some of these ones, some of these plants. So like the Carolina geranium, they say traditionally like nosebleed level bleeding and lower is what you use the Carolina geranium for. So, oops, let's go to the presentation here. I like to describe the plant. So it's a common weed found all over North America, like we saw, low growing. It rarely gets over a foot tall. The leaves are simple, so they're not compound. It's just a simple leaf, but the leaves are deeply lobed, as you can see from the pictures here. And along the stem, they will be alternating or zigzagging up the stem. The stem itself is hairy, and it grows from a single taproot. So you'll have a taproot in the ground, and all the stems will grow up off it. I don't know if this really helps you all picture this or not, but that's the way I talk. So single taproot, stems radiating out from it, hairy stems, alternating leaves, deeply lobed. It will have petals, it'll have flowers. There'll be 5 petals, kind of pinkish in color, very small, only about a 1/4 inch across. The seed pods, and we'll see pictures of the flowers and the seed pods in a moment, are very long and pointed. Sometimes this is called storkbill geranium, or sometimes it's storkbill, because it has this long, well, for a plant, long, pointy thing. Let's just jump forward here. Whoops. So here you can see the plant. This is what we're talking about, the long pointy seed pod with the crown at the base. We already talked about where in North America it's found. And then here are the flowers. Was there a question?
Yes. Is cranesbill just as effective?
Yeah, generally the geraniums, especially the wild geraniums, all have the really astringent roots that will work to stop the bleeding. So what you want from the Carolina geranium is the taproot, not the leaves, not the stem, not the flowers, not the seed pod. You actually need the root. And the bigger the root, the better you are. You want to peel away, wash the root off. You want to get all the dirt off it. Scrape off the outer skin. Use a knife to peel off the outer skin. And then you want to pulp up that root and put it in the wound. Traditionally, people would chew the root to pulp it up. That's when you're making a poultice or a plant mash. to apply to a wound. The traditional way is chewing it, just because the teeth are really good at, you know, grinding and rupturing those plant cell walls so that the chemicals you want can escape the cell walls and permeate the poultice, the mash, and then do their thing on the wound. So the root is, again, what I said, very astringent, and basically that causes the capillaries to slam shut. So it works good when you are bleeding from lots of capillaries and some smaller veins, but if you have arterial blood squirting into the air, you're going to have a problem there. It's not going to work with that. And then, as usual, I've included the link to the scientific literature that supports this sort of thing. So, any questions on Carolina geranium?
So far, no.
All right, let's move on to the next really good one is shepherd's purse. This is another one that's found all over North America. Let me jump forward just a second. You might have recognized this. It has very distinctive seed pods. These little heart-shaped things sticking off from the stem, those are the seed pods. And as you can see, this is found all over North America.
Oh.
Well,
like it's not loading, so
okay. I guess we're having some problems on the other end here. All right, so shepherd's purse, you'll find this more in sunny fields, you know, places where you would like to set your tent up generally instead of a hammock. It has simple leaves. They can be lobed. If you're familiar with mustard plants, this is in the mustard family, so it has a similar lobed leaf like that. The leaves alternate on the stem, so zigzag up the stem, and the vein pattern is what we call pinnate, where it has one center vein and all the other veins come off it, you know, kind of like a Christmas tree where you have a center trunk and then all the other veins come off it. The stem is smooth and round. There often will be several stems growing up from a taproot. But whereas the Carolina geranium kind of grew outwards, these stems all kind of go upwards. The flowers form a small white cluster, usually not even as big as a dime. The whole cluster of flowers, the individual flowers are really small. The cluster of flowers might be about the size of a dime across the top. So, but each individual flower is only 1/8 of an inch across. The seed pods are the very distinctive feature where they have that that heart-shaped shape, and they alternate along the stem. And like I said, they're found in sunny, open areas. So the flower cluster, it's going to be at the very top of the stem, and then below it will be seed pods of different levels of maturity. The lower down on the stem you go, the more mature the seed pods will be. As the stem is growing, it's producing new flowers and new seed pods. So I should say, unlike the Carolina geranium, in this case, the shepherd's purse, you want the entire plant. The stems, the leaves, the seed pods, the root, mash it all up, whatever you can grab. I actually kind of recommend staying away from the root because you have to use water to clean it. There's more stuff. I guess you probably should clean the leaves too. So, give it all just a good rinse, but then just start mashing it up. If you don't want to chew it up, you can just finely chop it with a knife, or mash it between a plate and a cup. But you want to rupture the cell walls so the chemicals in there will again stop the bleeding and trigger the coagulation. It's a hard word to say. So yeah, shepherd's purse, you'll find it all over the place. Sunny fields all across North America. Obviously a summertime plant up above the Mason-Dixon line, but as you come more south, especially like in Texas where a lot of you are, it's actually more of a wintertime plant. So winter into late spring. Then during the summer, at least here in Texas, you would switch over to the Carolina geranium because the shepherd's purse will be pretty much gone. But up north, it's pretty much there all summer long. So good plant. Any questions?
they haven't loaded, but we do have some that I didn't get to about the geranium.
Can we get to them now, or they're just not working?
It's not working. It's not loading.
Okay. Yeah, so if anyone out there has a computer newer than 2013 that they're willing to donate to Foraging Texas, that would be awesome. Okay, moving on. So now, bleeding and infected wounds, or preventing wounds from becoming infected, or prevent wounds from becoming infected. I'm running on like 3 hours of sleep, which is normal. But I'm also, working 60 hours a week in 4 days. Sorry. Anyway, so Heals All. This is another good one that you'll find all across North America. Wintertime plant in the south, summertime plant in the north. This is in the mint family. So like all mints, it has a square stem. The stem, if you cut it in half, you'll see it's actually hollow. The leaves will be opposite each other instead of alternating. So they'll be opposite each other, and then as they move up the stem, they will rotate 90 degrees. So that we cause opposite alternating. So, sideways, 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 up the stem like that. The flowers and the flowering structure is very unique because it forms this really almost a four-sided pyramidal structure. Then with the traditional mint flowers, if you remember, the mint flowers, it has a lower lip, two side petals, and then two top petals. Where is this? So it kind of, and then the stamen will be in the center. So it kind of looks like a dragon's mouth, but very, very distinctive one. This is one, if you spend a lot of time hiking, camping, anytime out in the woods, teach yourself to identify it. There's a link on Foraging Texas that will give you all sorts of pictures and different times of its growth period and so forth. Probably this and the next one, Yarrow, are by far the two best plants for this whole injury sort of thing going on. So very distinctive, heals all. Like I said, it's found all across North America, except for a little bit way up, I guess, is that the Yucatan or the Northern Territories in Canada. So way up there. It's pretty much available wherever there is wilderness. So this is another one where you use the whole plant. You can take the leaves, the flowers, the stem. Actually, leave the root behind just because you want the mint to stay spreading. So just snip it off at the top, poultice it up, chop it up, grind it up. Interestingly enough, this particular plant, if you want to make a neosporin sort of cream from it, you can mix it with grease and make your own neosporin basically out of it. So very, very potent. It both stops bleeding, so it triggers the coagulation, and I believe it also causes some of the blood vessel constriction. But it also is a very potent antibiotic in its own right. So definitely a really good choice if you're going to be out for a long time. So like if it's the beginning of a 2-week canoe trip up in the Boundary Waters canoe area, which I'm not sure if you can harvest plants up there, but in an emergency situation, you want to use a plant that you can put on there that will prevent any infection. So this is a good one. I was going to say something else, and now I forgot what it was. Oh yeah, if you're just going to be home later that day, or otherwise you want to wash the wound out with soap and water is always a good first choice. So these plants are for emergency long-term wilderness situations. Like I said, long camping trips, backpacking trips, you're hiking the Appalachian Trail or something like that. If you have the option of returning to civilization, that's your better choice. So I don't want anyone to come back later on and sue me because they got gangrene because they were out for an afternoon and nicked themselves and just didn't take care of the wound and rubbed the plant in it, and somewhere else they got infected. All right, so Heals All, though, really, really, really good one. This one grows really well in gardens too. So if you're looking for like two medicinal plants to grow in your herb garden, this is definitely one of them. The other one, of course, is yarrow. This has really an ancient history of being used for treating wounds. It was a common plant carried by the Roman legions. Very, very distinctive plant. The leaves are compound and compound and compound again to the point that they're described as feathery. So they really look like, they're so finely lobed that they look like feathers. And then they do alternate on the stem. The stem is square and hollow, so it's kind of like a mint. It's not in the mint family, but it has some of those same characteristics. In the wild, most often the flowers will be white. Now, there are a number of domesticated versions of yarrow. They all have the same medicinal properties, so you're good there. If you're growing yarrow in your yard and it happens to be orange or yellow, that's fine. It will still have all the medicinal properties. But usually in the wild, it will have a flat cluster of white flowers at the very top of the plant. The petals will vary between 4 and 5 petals. Mentioned their flat clusters. You will find this in kind of the shady, moist, sandy areas. So they don't like full sunlight necessarily, but they're not going to be in the deep woods. So a lot of times along borders, in openings of woods, near water, near sandy soil. These things, if you're familiar with Texas geology, they're all over the hill country. Lots and lots of them growing up there. And all through central Texas, and then in the more open field areas of East Texas. I found these out at Big Bend too. They seem to like sandy soil by far. So, a question, yay! I like questions.
What type of grease would you use to mix this with to make the salve?
Who's asking this? Just curious.
I don't know how to pronounce the name. I'm so sorry. Joe Q. Laird?
Okay, I'm just if I was wondering if you were a longtime fan or more new to this, because bacon grease. I always have bacon grease with me. Cool camping trick is you can buy unfilled chapstick tubes from Amazon, and then you pack bacon grease in them. And then when when you're okay, you have a little tube of bacon grease. You can use it to grease your little frying pan, or just get a little bit of fat energy. You can eat that way, or use the grease to mix with the heels all to make a salve. If you're going to use bacon grease, obviously you want to filter it really well. You don't want any little chunkies of bacon in there. You just want the pure grease. So yeah, bacon grease. I always have bacon grease with me. You could use even petroleum jelly. You could use Crisco. Olive oil will make an oil version, so it's kind of messy. But yeah, bacon grease. So yeah, I love bacon grease. I've multiple jars of it in the freezer, or in the refrigerator. Okay, is that it?
Yep.
Okay, so back to yarrow. As you can see here, when I describe the leaves as feathery, this is what I'm talking about. They're very, very, very fine. If you go to the Foraging Texas website, you will see a magnified version of they just keep getting split more and more and more, almost a fractal sort of plant. And found all over, including Hawaii, but all over North America, which is really handy. And this is another one that will, like I said, stop bleeding and treat infections, prevent infections, hopefully prevent infections, and help fight infections if you do have an infected wound. You mash up the whole plant, so the leaves, the flowers, the stems, the roots, all that. Clean the root before, at least rinse everything off with some clean water, but clean the root, and then just mash it all up. Like I said, chew it into a poultice, or grind it between two plates. Somehow you want to rupture those cell walls and apply it to the wound. Side note, if you are applying plants like this to the wound, and then you have the bandage over it. You want to change the bandage probably 2 to 4 times a day. And when you do so, you want to put fresh plant matter there with the wound. After a day or two, you probably don't want to pack anything in the wound, because the last thing you want is the wound to start healing around the plant matter. So, really after about 2 days, unless it's a really serious wound and it's still not bleeding, you want to stop packing plants into the wound, and you want to move into plants that you can make a wash with to wash out the wound. Does that make sense? So after 2 days, stop sticking stuff in the wound. You still want to bandage it, but now instead of a plant to fight infection and bleeding, you want a plant-based wash to fight the infection. So let's talk about that next. So infected wounds, and if you're wondering what this is, this was a cat bite I got a long time ago. This is before, so more than 16 years ago. Or was it? I don't know.
I was about 4.
Things blurred together, yeah. Cat bites are notorious for being infected. So whenever you have a wound, you want to flush it, wash it out really well first, just to get any debris out, whether it's a knife cut or stabbed with a stick or an animal bite. You want to use soap, and hopefully you have some antibacterial salve with you. If you have a hiking kit, you should have a first aid kit. You should have a little tube of Neosporin. If you don't, then that's why you're listening to this. But really, my first recommendation, folks, is some sort of antibacterial cream rather than these plants. Because at least the plants, with the cream, it's made under sterile conditions. You're not going to stick anything bad in there. But the bandages change 1 to 4 times a day. Basically, especially large wounds, not only will they bleed, but they will also seep other fluids. And so that after a while, the bandages will just get soaked and heavy and uncomfortable and rub, and can actually start to harbor infections. So as the bandages get soaked with fluids, blood, not just blood though, you want to change the wound. If you're still bleeding, you want to keep that bandage on there, even if it's soaked in blood. You want to keep that there to stop them, like pretending I'm bleeding from my arm. You want to keep that direct pressure and all that stuff and stop the bleeding. But you want to keep the wound dry. So you want to change the bandages when they get wet. You want to keep it out of pond water, river water, wild water. You want to flush it out with clean water. So water that you've boiled or otherwise sterilized. Of course, let it cool down to a comfortable temperature before washing out the wound. But just soap and water does a really good job of preventing infections. All right, but other things can do that too. Oh, we have a question.
Oh, lots of questions.
Oh, good.
All right. I have clay alkaline soil. Will yarrow and heelsall grow if I plant seeds?
Okay, so let me just go back. Yeah, so clay alkaline soil, you're going to be better off with heelsall rather than yarrow. You can try yarrow. You can amend the soil with just a bag of like playground sand, but the heelsall, it's more of a clay sort of plant. It seems to do well in that. Okay, next.
Are there any lookalikes to yarrow that we should watch out for?
Okay. A long time ago, I thought there were certain plants that just don't have mimics. They're so different from any other plant that there's no way people can mistake this plant for that plant. Doing this now for almost 14 years has taught me people will go out of their way to misidentify a plant. So, yeah, there are things like prairie parsley, which has yellow flowers. Queen Anne's lace is vaguely familiar. Study the plants. We're giving you basically five plants tonight, 7 plants tonight. they're worth spending the extra time to identify. Like in the case of yarrow, there's really nothing else that looks like yarrow in my opinion, but people can really force plants to fit their perceived ideas. And so if you pay attention to details closely, to all the details, the flowers, the leaves, the stem, the growing areas, don't just use what I've talked tonight. Go to the Foraging Texas website, go to some other reference books, and really teach yourself how to identify yarrow. Go to a nursery or a plant center that is selling yarrow. Say, hey, can you show me the yarrow? And go look at that. It's worth doing. And once you do that, then there isn't anything that you're going to mistake for yarrow. Okay.
Nope.
No more?
Mm-mm.
Okay. All right, so infected wounds. The first thing, and I'm just going to jump ahead here, is the oak gall. So you may see on oak trees these weird round balls that are not acorns. They almost look like fruit. This is the result of what's called an oak gall wasp laying its eggs in the bark of the oak tree, along with some chemicals that change the DNA that cause the tree to grow this round wooden ball around the oak gall eggs. The oak hates this. It doesn't want those eggs in there. So it starts pumping a bunch of chemicals into that oak gall to try and kill the larva or the eggs. Mainly tannic acid and gallic acid, which are very astringent, very antibacterial. They kill bacteria and fungus. So both the galls and the inner bark, so not the outer craggy bark of oaks. Go back. Well, yeah. So not this outer bark. You have to peel away some of this outer bark and get to the inner bark. But both those have the medicinal properties. Just a refresher on oak trees. There's dozens and dozens of types of oak trees just in North America, but these trees are found all over the world. But in general, their leaves are going to be simple, so non-compound. They're going to be, as far as the edge goes, they can be intact, which means no teeth or serrations, or they can be lobed, or they can be kind of sharply lobed with what we call toothed. So learn the oaks in your area or the areas where you're going to be, because it's a good tree to know. The vein pattern is pinnate. This is again where it has one center vein and then the other veins come off it, kind of like branches off a Christmas tree. The bark is going to be all craggy and just like your mental picture of a tree with the craggy bark. It's going to have that. It's going to be found more in the lowland areas of woods. They usually require water, which will be along streams and stuff. So in the lower areas of woods, as you go up into higher elevations, you're more likely to encounter pine trees. But in this case, you want the oaks. This surprised me that Idaho does not have any oak trees, or at least according to the U.S. government who produces these maps, Idaho is oak tree free. If someone out there is from Idaho, I'd love for you to, prove me wrong or prove them wrong. Whoop, a question.
Oh, no.
Oh, not a
Funny
question.
comment.
Oh, a comment. Do we want to hear it?
Mr. Kevin Rust says, no oak in Idaho if I know my geology. Earlier you said...
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm a chemist. I don't have to know anything else. We take the... Well, anyway. Yeah, so, pretty much everywhere you're going to find oak trees. Oops. And then, again, the uses, you want to make a tea. So you take either the inner bark or crushed up galls. You want to chop it up really finely. You want to make sure you have lots of surface area exposed of these wooden, little bits of wood. If you can get them down to the size of like coffee grounds, that would be awesome. That's probably a lot of work though. But the smaller you can chop it up, beat it between two rocks or something like that. You want to pulp it. Then you want to put about a quarter cup of it in a quart of water, boil it down until it's like halfway down. Add water back to bring it back to a quart and then use that to wash the wound out 1 to 4 times a day. And that will go a long ways towards preventing any infection. And as usual, there is the scientific link, research to back this up. Side note, with this tea, you want to make it fresh every day. It'll last like in a canteen or in a water bottle for at least 24 hours, but after that, it's best just to get rid of it and start with fresh again. So, you want to, if you're going to be out for a while, you're going to be multiple days, you want to spend some time getting oak inner bark. Please don't strip it from the trunk of the tree. Hopefully you can find a branch, a large branch that's either breaking or broken. Well, actually not broken, because you want it to be alive. You need the living inner bark, but take it from a branch rather than the trunk. It's going to be less damaging for the tree. If possible, if you could melt some wax or something over where you took the bark from. But this is why it's better just to have a little tube of Neosporin with you so you don't have to wreck the trees. Okay, any questions on oaks?
No.
Very good antimicrobial properties, or antimicrobial. Okay, the next is for infected wounds would be the sweet gum. And there's some really cool things going on here. But for those of you who aren't familiar with the sweet gum tree, a little surprising, this is the tree that your neighbor has that you hate. It has the simple leaves. They are, let me jump forward one. It has 5 points, kind of like a star shape. And this is the tree that produces those spiky round balls, starting about now down here in the Houston area. But throughout the summer and into the fall, the farther north you go. So the bark is smooth and spotted. It's not craggy like the oak. It's more of a smooth with lots of little speckles on it. And you find it similar to the oak trees. You find it in more moist woods, damp, wetter woods, so lower areas. They'll also be along borders and even used in landscaping. But if you're somewhere where they have landscaping, you're not out in the wilderness area where you need to be attacking the tree to get plants to heal yourself. Okay, so we already covered California and Texas, and then heading east all the way up into New York. So if you're in the western Midwest or Canada, you're kind of out of luck. So the leaves, especially the younger fresh leaves in late spring to midsummer, are a very good antibiotic, but also the sap pretty much all year round. To collect the sap, you make a V-shaped cut in the trunk and just let the sap ooze, and then you just take that sap and apply it to the wound. The sap will, on the tree, it will start to dry and harden. So even at that point, you can collect it, scrape it up off the tree, mix it with a little bit of water to make a Elmer's glue sort of consistency paste, and apply that to the wound. But the sap, given the choice, you actually want the sap over the leaves, because the sap is just amazingly antibiotic. Again, we got the scientific article here that talks about it, but the sweet gum, very, very good antimicrobial against bacteria. Not sure about fungus though. Usually fungus in a wound isn't what's causing the problem. Usually it's some sort of bacteria, E. coli or something else from poor hygiene, not washing your hands after pooping and then playing with the wound, that sort of thing. So, but the sweet gum sap is very, very, very potent.
Ooh, we got questions.
Oh, question, yay.
First, can oak be dried and saved?
Yes, oak, the bark of the oak and the oak galls, yes, they can be dried and saved. If possible, actually leave them like in the form of the oak gall or a an actual piece of wood like the size of your finger or a chunk of the wood, because you do not want it exposed to oxygen. The oxygen will break down the tannic acid, the gallic acid over time. So if you're going to store it like at home, if you can vacuum seal it in chunks, that's the way you want to store it. And then just, throw it in your backpack. And when you're out in the woods, you can use it, scrape it up and use it that way. I know the oak galls themselves will store for at least a year. The wood, I'm not sure. Side note, the wood is going to have a lower concentration of the gallic acid and the tannic acid as opposed to the oak gall. So you may end up wanting to use a little bit more in that case. But if all you have is the inner wood, go for it. Is there a question?
Yep, a couple more for sweet gum.
Okay.
Is the sap good in tinctures, and can the leaves be used in tinctures?
Yes, so both the sap and the leaves can be tinctured. Keep in mind, if you are applying alcohol to a wound, that in itself has antimicrobial properties, but they've shown that the drying effect of alcohol is so severe that it will actually slow down the healing process some. So they recommend not washing out wounds with alcohol. So really you are better off, if you're going to do this, dry the leaves and dry the sap and then rehydrate them as needed rather than making a tincture. Just for the best healing for wounds. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. Okay, so any other questions? Like I said, you can go to these articles that I'm posting, or Merriwether is posting, to learn more about the properties. Oh, and just a side note, this website, the www.researchgate.net, absolutely best place to find scientific, actual scientific papers. What's nice about, you need an account, but the account is free, and once you sign up and have an account, it actually gives you the ability to email the researchers and try and get them to answer questions. If you're doing that, obviously, please be respectful, and be patient, and don't just demand stuff from the scientists. That makes them ornery. Okay, next up is the Cocklebur. A lot of people probably know this one. This is the one with the football-shaped stickers that get stuck in your clothing and your horse's tail and your dog's fur and everything else. So these are found all across North America, though not Alaska. I want to say they are found in Hawaii. Speaking from personal experience 3 decades ago. Man, I miss Hawaii. But anyway, so yeah, the infected wounds. Cockleburs, leaves are simple, toothed and lobed, pinnate veins alternating. The stem, and we'll see a picture of the stem, is kind of interesting. It'll be green to purple and may often have linear spots in it. And this is found in sunny areas, generally near water. So near ponds and streams is where you're going to find thick clusters of these plants. I've found them up in New York, Minnesota, South Dakota, California, all across Texas, from East Texas out to Hill Country, out to Big Bend. So even Idaho and the state we think is Colorado. So all over the place. You can see here the kind of purple stems. Oh, don't I have a... Dang, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought I had a picture of the stem. I'll have to post...
Colorado.
It is Colorado. Woohoo! Thank you. Okay, so this is another plant where you want to use the leaves and the stems, not so much the seeds or the seed pods or anything else. So you want to have the green leaves and the younger stems. Crush them up. Now this is one that you do not want to chew into a poultice. You do not want to swallow Cocklebur juices. It will make you sick. It's okay to apply to as a flushing out of a wound. Um, but yeah, you can make a poultice of it and apply it to the wound, or a wash and flush it out. But do not swallow it, please. So if you're going to make a poultice, crush it up. This is me crushing it between a cup and a plate, or chopping it up or something like that. But the stem and leaves have a very potent, again, antibiotic in them that will help prevent the infection from growing. Obviously, soap and water would be your best choice getting to civilization, but again, in an emergency long-term situation, like I said, a multi-week trip where you're far away from civilization, the Cocklebur is a good thing to apply. If you have a blister, it also will help with that, like in your foot or on your hand, like a blister from hiking, you don't want to get infected. You can put a Band-Aid over it and put the Cocklebur leaf poultice over it too, just to prevent the blisters from getting infected. Ooh, we have a question.
There were some questions that didn't load. But can I drink my tincture for an antiviral too?
Okay, I'm assuming
Mr. Rust?
Mr. Rust, and he's talking about the sweet gum. Yeah, the sweet gum tincture will work antiviral. The sweet gum sap is amazing. All sorts of medicinal properties. Including antiviral action, tumor prevention and reduction, and a number of other things. I should do a whole class someday just on sweet gum. Ooh, anti-cancer plants. Note to self. Okay, is that a hand raised?
Yes.
But yeah, you can drink the tincture. Oops.
Is it best to hang things to dry?
Yes. The reason you want to hang things to dry in some cool, dry place with good airflow, as opposed to drying them in an oven or a dehydrator, is because, remember, plants have a cell wall, and it's a hard, rigid structure. And all the medicinal compounds you want are inside that cell wall. So if you just take the green plant and put it in hot water, none of that stuff can get out. That's why you need to rupture it. Now, when you allow a plant just to die and dry out naturally hanging, the last thing a plant does after it realizes, oh dang, I'm dead, is it triggers a series of enzymes whose purpose are to start chewing holes through the cell wall. And so you want those enzymes to put those holes through the cell wall. Once that happens, the rate of evaporation of the water jumps way up. All the water leaves, the enzymes stop working, and now you basically have a perfectly preserved plant with lots of holes in that cell wall. So now when you put it in a fluid to make a tea or a wash or a tincture, there's escape paths for the chemicals that were inside the cells to now escape out into the fluid. So if you force dry it, like in a dehydrator or an oven or something like that, you can actually screw up the enzymes who are trying to put those holes in the cell wall. And so you won't have many or really any holes in the cell wall. You can still crush up the dried plant really, really fine, and that will work. But really it's best for maximum extraction of the medicinal compounds just to let the plants air dry for about 2 weeks. If it's a bark or a root, in that case you probably want to go more like 2 months, which is why you want to just chew something up into a poultice when you're out in the wild with the green fresh plant. It's all about rupturing that cell wall so the stuff inside can get out.
More questions.
More questions.
Would Cocklebur liniment work well?
Yes. So if you're making a liniment, so using isopropyl alcohol or something, that would probably extract the compounds, thinking about the chemistry involved here. So you could use a rubbing alcohol extraction. Now, keep in mind the rubbing alcohol is still going to do some of the drying effect that the ethanol will, not quite as much. It's a slightly bigger, more oily molecule as opposed to the ethanol molecule of drinking alcohols. But you could make a liniment out of it.
Last question. Someone's having trouble reading the slides. Is there somewhere they can look to take notes?
I wonder. Well, okay. This video will remain on Facebook forever, and then I'm also, when I have time, editing them, fixing the audio, taking out like the notes at the beginning, and otherwise improving them and posting them on the Dr. Merriwether YouTube channel. So if you can't see them now, especially if you're looking on a phone, it's going to be a little tricky. But yeah, you can replay the videos and pause them and zoom in on them and so forth, and hopefully that will help you. Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, back to the... Ooh, we only have 6... Man, this time goes fast. You know what? Let's save the mushrooms for next week. So we only have like 4 minutes left. So, because I want to do another shout out to the sponsor, Wazoo Survival Gear. So like I said, they have a website with all sorts of really neat stuff for both suburban, urban, and wilderness adventures. All right, it's 8:57. It's, we've almost been here an hour. I know we didn't get through all of it. We're going to save the 2 mushrooms for next week, so you have something to look forward to. And then also next week, hello. All right,
Oh,
I'll get
okay,
her in
that's
there.
not
I'm trying to get the. Oops. Yeah. So we'll finish up infected wounds, and then we'll go back to fungal infections. Pretty much the same plants. So I think what we're going to do is jump ahead. To pain and burns. So yeah, next week we will be looking at plants to relieve pain and soothe burns. So at that note, I guess we're actually going to end 2 minutes early so I can actually get a little rest. See you next week. All right.
Bye.
Thank you very much for watching. I will go through afterwards and answer any questions that were missed, and just type in the answers to questions too. So hope you had a good time, and good night. And